So a few days later, it came that Genny would go home, and it was quite sad. But I didn't know it at the time, but that was the end of me and Genny. We had a great time together, but there just wasn't the spark of wanting to be a couple anymore, and it did upset me. I didn't, cry or anything like that, but I felt like my heart was breaking because we had a son and stuff like that. But we were still going to be friends. It was obviously a test for Genny. It was a test for me, but there was just too much time between us, and obviously she had met somebody else. I hadn't been bothered with anybody, to be quite honest. I had a couple of chances to date some nice chicks, but I just wasn't in the mood for that. I just wanted to live my life and have a bit of freedom and do what I wanted to do, and not have to really answer to anybody. So I didn't fly to the mainland with Genny, because we were super busy. So took Genny to the small airport. There was a couple of American people that we'd met downtown that were flying to Miami, and they would make sure that Genny was okay, and that she would get onto her plane going back to Dublin. So it was going to be a long flight for her. So we said goodbye at the airport. There was a couple of tears from Genny, obviously. The thing was, she'd had a great time in Belize. She'd been somewhere where she hadn't been before. I took her. Genny couldn't swim, but I had taken her to Hol Chan. I'd taken her into shallow water, where she was visibly afraid. But I took her, down, and she had a great time, except for getting the slap on the ass and being rudely assaulted by that fucking shithead. But overall, she had a brilliant time, and it was, something that she was never going to forget. And she was going to obviously to go home and glad to see Connor. So I had given Genny a bunch of cash, I think about 4,000 or 5,000 Belize, which probably would have changed when she got back home into either, I don't know if it was euros back then at the time, in the early 90s, or punts. I think it might have been punts, Irish punt. But she got a lot of money. So when she got home, she was able to take Connor on a little holiday. I think they went to Greece or something like that. And we stayed in touch as much as we could. And, every now and then I would phone her. It was expensive to phone. For like 30 minutes on the phone was like fucking $300 Belize. So I would phone her once every couple of weeks, but I would write on a continual basis at least once a week. And so she would have like loads of letters. And when I got photographs, we had photographs that was taken together. We had photographs of her getting her hair done, so those photographs came out perfectly when they were processed, and I sent those pictures home, and Genny still has those today, as far as I know. So, and that's the best part of nearly 30 years ago. So she had a great time on that, and so I didn't have any drama with Gutsy or anybody. I did see Patojo a couple of times, but he never looked in my direction. He just kept his head focused and he walked on. Saw Freddie once, and I told Freddie to his face, I get you in the right fucking place, mate. I'm gonna fucking stamp on your windpipe. And he fucked off. Sabbath I didn't see. Sabbath was a cowardly fucking barrel of monkey spunk. He stayed in the local bandito bar, and he was just a mouthpiece, and he had his little clique that he was like the godfather of, but there was no dramas from him at all. But I had my fucking heart now set out on these other guys. That was it. And I was like a bulldog with a wasp. I wasn't gonna, that was it now. I was gonna see this through no matter how it went. So the diving continued. I had completed my assistant instructor course with Dave, and I would be heading on to my instructor a couple of months down the line. So there was a guy in the island called Dick Davis, and Dick Davis was an American guy. Dick was a millionaire, and Dick had married a girl called Sally Jean, whose father owned Tropic Air. Now Dick was a pilot himself, and Dick was a lovely guy. And Dick's house was just a wee bit further up from David. It was surrounded by a security fence, and Dick was quite a private guy. Him and CJ, or Sally Jean, had broken up and were still kind of friends. Dick lived on his own. He was quite a handsome guy, and Dick was a chick magnet. And I would see Dick often downtown, and we would have a bit of a chat and stuff. And I didn't know Dick was also into judo. So Dick saw me practicing at the back of Dave's one day with a couple of young cops, and Dick stood watching. And Dick was a second dan black belt in judo. he was a competitive fighter. And back then, before it was really, you know, MMA now, Dick was into all this martial arts and stuff, and boxing, and Dick was well built. Dick was probably in his 50s back then, tall, 6'3", very lean, big guy, very, very muscular, and Dick was a fantastic freediver. So I had met Dick a few times, and he said to me one day, he says, I'm going to be going up to the States. He said, I'm going to be going up to St. Petersburg. He says, would you like to come with me? He said, I'm going to fly up. And I says, I can't afford a ticket at the minute. And he goes, I've got my own plane. He says, I've spoken to Dave, he says, about this. He says, and I'm going to go up and look at a boat. He says, do you want to come up? He says, I'll fly you up. He says, take care of it. I had a bit of money, but I just couldn't spend it. I'd given Genny a bunch of money, and it cost me over $3,000 to bring her out and all this type of stuff. And then, so I was kind of down a bit of money, and I was still trying to save up. He says, I'll take care of everything. Again, I was really embarrassed, and I says, no, I'll pay my way, Dick. And he says, don't worry about it. So I spoke to Dave. Dave says, yep, going up. He says, go up to the States. I didn't know the premise behind this at all. So Dick had been speaking to Dave, and there was 2 movies out in the 90s called Cocoon and Cocoon The Return. And in them movies was a boat called the Manta 4. And Dick was going up to buy this boat from the movies. It had sat in St. Petersburg for a while, and it hadn't really done anything. So I didn't know about this. And Dick and Dave had a deal together. Now that Dave had the Belize Dive Centre, Gaz and Dave's Belize Dive Centre, Dick was going to go up and buy the boat and bring it down, and Dave was going to use it for going to the Blue Hole, going to do island diving. And Dave wanted me to be one of the dive masters on the boat. Again, I didn't know this, so I said, yeah, okay, then Dick, I'll come up. And a couple of days later, we flew up to St. Petersburg in Florida on the west coast, and I didn't realize Dick had a house there, not far from St. Petersburg. So we landed at the local airport, and we drove to Dick's house, and nice little ranch style house. We stayed there for a couple of days. Dick made a couple of phone calls. He had loads of land, so we went over the land. We went shooting, just shooting targets. I didn't want to shoot any animals, so we went shooting. We were out for dinner. We went and we met some of Dick's friends, and it was brilliant time. And then he says one morning, he says, we're going to go and look at the boat. And what boat? And he goes, didn't Dave tell you? And I was like, no. And he goes, oh shit. So Dick told me the whole story. And I'd never heard of the movies Cocoon. I'd never seen them or anything like this. And so we went, and there was the boat. And the boat was 52 foot long with a 20 foot wide beam, lovely big boat. At this particular time, it only had one deck on it. It just had one cabin. And once Dick was to get it, Dick was to build a second cabin on top of it. It looked absolutely beautiful. Really, really nice boat, nice big cabin. The bridge was on the down floor, but the bridge was going to be put up on the second floor with a better view. So we went up, we looked at the boat. Dick signed the papers and had bought the boat. So it was going to have to be sailed down from St. Petersburg, which probably was going to be a couple of weeks. So Dick and I spent a week and a half up in St. Petersburg. His mechanic, who was also, he had a marine mechanic as well as an aircraft mechanic, went over the boat, replaced bits and pieces, did this, did that, did the other, made sure that the boat was working, seaworthy, for the journey down to San Pedro. A couple of weeks later, a week and a half later, Dick and I flew back down to Belize. Went to see Dave. Dave was like, what do you think of the boat call? I was fucking blown away by it. And Dave sat down, and him and Dick and Gary went over all the details with me, and says, we want you to be the dive master on the boat. Dick had an idea to do cage diving for sharks. So Dick had an aluminium dive cage built. It didn't really take off. We went out a couple of times. We saw a couple of small tiger sharks and a couple of bull sharks, but that you weren't allowed to chum the waters and all this type of stuff. There was too many tourists down there, and the last thing that they wanted was a fucking fatal shark attack. So it didn't happen. It didn't go anywhere. It didn't go down, and yeah, so that the cage was left in Dick's backyard. But a couple of weeks later, after some sea trials for when the boat was brought down, a guy called Tim, I can't remember Tim's last name. Tim was also a pilot. He did all the mosquito spraying. He was a really cool guy. So Tim was a pilot and he was a boat captain, and Tim and one of his friends sailed the boat down from St. Petersburg, and it ended up being docked at the Belize Dive Centre at one of the berths. That was going to be my new home. I lived on the boat. I gave up the apartment. It was just too much money. It was $650 a month plus utilities. Back then that was a lot of money. So I gave up the apartment and I ended up living on the boat for a while, because it was parked right beside the dive centre. And again, I was as happy as a pig in shit.